Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Distinction webinar series. We are highly excited to have you, and thank you for taking your time this weekend to join us for the Distinction webinar series. Without wasting time, we'll just get started. And our webinar today is titled AI Beyond the Hype: What Businesses Must Get Right to Grow. I do not have to emphasize AI, the edge of AI, all the hype, the realities, and beyond that. We are living through one of the fastest technology shifts in modern business history. In just a few years, artificial intelligence has moved from research labs into everyday business conversations. Tools are everywhere, pilots are easy to launch, and experimentation is at an all-time high. Yet, for many organizations, one question remains unanswered. How does AI actually translate into sustainable business growth? We are seeing a pattern across industries. Businesses are adopting AI quickly, but clarity is lagging behind. Strategy is often an afterthought. Governance is delayed, and growth outcomes are assumed rather than designed. That's why today's conversation is titled AI Beyond the Hype: What Businesses Must Get Right to Grow. I'm Faiz Bashir, the CEO and co-founder of FlexISAF, and I'm your host today, hosting a very special guest, Bulama Yusuf, the CEO of Intellectual Apps UK, an AI strategy consultant. Bulama and I go back many years. We first met during the early days of Google Developer Group. I was the manager of GDG then, and Bulama was heading the Java user group. The focus was on building strong technical foundations and sharing knowledge. So we had really very common interests. Over time, our paths crossed more closely when Bulama joined us at FlexISAF, where he led, interestingly, the first version of Distinction. What has always stood out to me about Bulama is his consistency in evolving. From deep engineering to platform leadership to advisory work, he has continually adapted his thinking as technology and business realities changed. As I mentioned today, he is the CEO of Intellectual Apps UK, working with organizations to approach AI with clarity, structure, and responsibility, focusing not just on tools, but on decision making, control, and long-term growth. This session is not about trends or demos. It's about how leaders should think as AI becomes embedded in business strategy. You are highly welcome, Bulama Yusuf.
Thank you, Faiz. Thank you for that warm introduction. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all that are attending.
Now, Chris B. James Christopher.
I think you're on mute, Faiz, if you're speaking.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Before we deep dive into AI beyond hype, I would like to take us back down the memory lane. You happen to be an accountant, actually, in your undergrad. So can you take us back? What happened? How did you find yourself to be an AI leader today?
Yes, really interesting. As you were talking about the early GDG days, I was just smiling because we really enjoyed that time of, playing with technology and, building stuff. So yes, I studied accounting in the university. And people find that to be quite, interesting. That how is it I studied accounting and then I'm fully into tech, software and now AI. Well, it started after I finished my secondary school. Usually, when you finish secondary school, it will be around maybe June, July, and then you start university maybe a year later or a few months later. So, what happened was my parents enrolled me in this computer training course for those 6 months before I got into the university. And that's how I got exposed to computer programming and so on. I learned QBasic, programming with Excel macros, MS-DOS, and a few other applications. I wasn't happy with that decision that my parents put me in that particular course because then we used to go to my friend's house and play video games, Nintendo 64, if any of you know that. And I had to go for these classes Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So that took time away from playing games. I wasn't happy about it. But looking back, that was the single most important thing that started me on this journey of tech. When I got into university, even though I was studying accounting, I helped them to build, software, interestingly, for calculating results and GPAs in my department using Excel. And by the time I graduated, I think around maybe 80% of the university was using that software. And I was more or less like a consultant. I didn't know it then, but I would go to various departments and help them, install it, train the secretary there on how to use it, and give them support. So that's how I got into tech.
Interesting. Many tech persons I know have their own story, and it's always an interesting one.
Hmm.
So like we said, back in the GDG, there's building community,
Hmm.
programming and stuff like that. You've now moved to advising businesses
Mm.
on AI strategy. What has changed in how you think about technology's role in growth?
So, given that I have a technical background myself, I did it out of passion, and I found out that it turned out to be a very good skill that people were looking for. And I worked at a technology company then called Quantech. And what I noticed was we would spend weeks and months building systems, and then we bring it before the client, and then they tell us it's not doing what they want. And I used to feel very bad about it because we put so much time and effort in building this thing, and then it's still not working for the client. So I realized that they didn't really understand the work that engineers do when they're building software. So in an attempt to try and get them to understand what engineers do in building software, I realized that the more important thing was for engineers to understand the business side of things. And that really opened my mind, and I got deeper into it, talking to these business leaders, spending more time with them. And I realized that there's a lot of value to deliver to business leaders and businesses. And I kind of evolved into that role over time, and that's how I've gotten into what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, and I completely forgot. We also not really cross paths at Quantec, but
Yes.
interestingly, Quantec is really one of the early ICT companies back in Abuja and has groomed a lot of us. I did
Hmm.
my IT at Quantec. I think after I've left Quantec, you joined Quantec, and
Exactly.
that's when we met at GDG. You were actually at Quantec.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. That's true.
So let's really deep dive into AI and business growth. We've seen AI is really doing a lot, right? We've seen startups like fastest growing startups recently becoming unicorns in 12 months, and stuff like that. But there are a lot of, studies and so on from MIT. Many businesses still, in terms of the outcome or the output, are
Mm,
not really seeing the results. So
mm,
when leaders say they want to use AI to grow, what does growth actually mean in practical terms? Revenue, efficiency, scale, or what is it?
mm. So yes, that's an interesting question. So the first thing is, the business leaders, they have to define what growth means for them, given their own current circumstances. But if we look at it in general, we can say that a business, for it to grow, simply means for them to make more profit, right? So they want to have more margins from the operations that they do. So the question is, how do they take AI and apply it to their business in such a way that it produces those results? And because of the way AI has been positioned and the hype around it, business leaders have gotten the wrong notion about it. They see it as a magical wand, right? That you just bring it in and then wave it, and all the problems in your business is going to go away. I mean, we're talking about AI, isn't it? So it's intelligence. But they quickly realize that it's not just that. It takes a little bit more work to get it to work. So growth would mean, are you taking it to improve your efficiency so that it ultimately increases your profit? Or is it not as direct of a path in using it in your business? Because in some cases, you find out that applying AI won't be linked directly to some business benefit. For example, if you have staff that are tied up doing a lot of manual work, and at the same time, it's stopping them from doing what their primary task is that leads to real business growth, you find out if you can take AI and apply it to that manual task, you free up your staff to do things that they were meant to do, which now makes the business more profitable, even though they're not using AI directly in that particular piece of work. So, so those are the ways businesses can grow. We could apply it to inefficiencies, apply it to, customer facing activities, higher personalization, and so on. Whatever it is that allows the business to handle more and achieve whatever that particular business sets as the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's break it down further. You've already mentioned, the mistakes business leaders make,
Mm.
but can you expatiate on that? What from your experience and working with businesses, helping them in their AI strategy, what's the most common mistakes, that leaders make when they approach AI?
Okay. The most common mistake is not it's not so obvious to the business leaders, and it's around their expectations, right? They soak up a lot of information on media and so on, social media, online, traditional news, and so on. And they have this expectation that AI can do everything, and they just bring it in. They themselves don't have to do any work. It just works right into their business and it produces results. But when they realize that there's a lot of work to be done for AI to truly make any business grow or transform, there's disappointment there. And then they tend to not want to pursue those things because of the amount of work required. For example, your processes and workflows, your data has to be in order for AI to even come in and make any difference. And then you also quickly realize that it's more about people and change management than it is about the technology itself, right? So all of these turn business leaders off and they see the amount of work they need to handle. I give people an example. I tell them, this James Gosling, he invented the Java programming language. And I tell them, if you have a software team and you go and take James Gosling and you put him on that team, he may not be able to be productive from day one if you don't have very clear laid out processes. When he comes in, he needs to understand the context, he needs to understand what you're building, he needs to fit into that culture before he's able to become productive. Now, on a larger scale, the same thing applies with AI. You can't just take it and just put it into your chaotic business operations, right? You need to have standard ways of doing things, and your data has to be in place. You need to know how everything works and connects. Chaos will only make things worse. So that expectation, having that wrong expectation going in is one of the most common things I see with business leaders. And then when you explain what needs to be done, they get turned off. At the core of it, using AI in your business is actually digital transformation, but people don't see it that way. And digital transformation has, so many facets to it. So that's the number one thing I see with business leaders, and that really gets them quite disappointed, thinking that AI will just walk in and the magic would happen.
Interesting. So you mentioned data, and
Hmm.
that clicked my mind because with my little experience in AI too, I know they say data is very important. Can
Hmm.
you really talk more about data when business leaders need to adopt AI in their transformation and so on? Why is it important and how important is that?
Hmm. Thank you. So I work mostly with, like mid-sized businesses. And what is peculiar to these mid-sized businesses is their journey from being a small business and evolving into a mid-sized business is quite similar in the way that when they are small, they tend to do things manually, but as they grow, they acquire software systems here and there. So a problem comes up, oh, how do we track our customer engagement? They go and get a CRM. How do we handle outreach and marketing, right? They get some kind of emailing system and so on. Over time and over the years, they find out that they end up with multiple systems handling different aspects of the business, which seems to be good, but then you find out as a business leader, you hardly get an overview of what's happening in your business. And you keep on paying for software, but your staff end up doing lots of manual work. And the challenge there is that the data within the business is all over the place, right? You want to pull up a particular report, you need to move data from one system to the other and put it together. Or for you to carry out a particular workflow, you have to export data from one system and then import it into another system and then continue. So when you want to integrate AI, that's a problem because you don't have that single view of data across the business, right? So for it to work, you have to solve that data problem first of all. How do you make sure that data flows well within these systems? Which isn't an AI thing, right? How do you make sure data flows well before you can now apply that intelligence at certain points and say, okay, for this workflow, this is where we need the intelligence, and then you apply it. So this is for a business that is looking to integrate AI, which isn't obvious. What people see and talk about AI in terms of, oh, AI needs data, a lot of data, and so on, is in the context of building AI models because those things require massive data in order to train them, right? For them to recognize enough patterns and for them to be able to now, to be used for inference and so on. So that's what people think about when you talk about the need data for AI. But even when you need to integrate it into a business, you're not building any AI model. You're just taking the model and using it in the business. You need to have that seamless flow of data as well. So that's how it's important. And that's how it's a problem for those who are unable to tackle it correctly.
Interesting. If I, to based on what I understand, maybe
Mm,
uh, to recap, businesses rely on data to make set decisions, and most times they have different systems. And
Mm-hmm.
for you to be able to integrate AI in your business transformation, it also will use this data to help you solve your problems. So that's why it's important to think about data. Where
Mm-hmm.
does this data lie? How can you make it available or integrated with these systems?
Exactly. And it's usually it's the boring stuff.
Uh, all right. So I think I believe we have many business owners here and us really thinking, how can we use this AI, right, to achieve our goals? And based on your recent work with businesses in the UK and beyond, where have you seen AI genuinely move the needle for growth? Or maybe I'll put in a layman's perspective, how AI will increase their revenue and where has it failed to deliver?
Hmm. So there are different views on this, but for me and the work that we do is we tend to encourage the leaders to use AI in areas where it can improve efficiency, mostly like back office operations, where you have a lot of high data workload and where there's manual work, right? A very good indicator I tell business leaders is if there's anywhere in your business workflow where someone has to click a button to download a worksheet to do something, then that's a good indication that there's some manual work going on and it can be done more efficiently with AI. And of course, depending on the volume. So it's in areas like this that we have seen the best use of AI. But most leaders think about AI in terms of revenue generation. For me, it's a little bit tricky because when you want to use it for revenue generation, it will only make sense when you're deploying it at scale, right? So if you have systems and maybe you have global users or even national users, large sets of users, that's where you would want to deploy AI to help you to become more, to generate more revenue and so on. But in doing it that way, you end up having to give the AI more autonomy. Otherwise, you create another bottleneck with your own staff having to handle everything. And because of the non-deterministic nature of AI, the more autonomy you give it, the more likely the issues you're going to have, right? Because you may give it the same inputs and then its output would be different. So that creates a lot of challenge for deploying AI at scale, especially for customer-facing areas. And that's why you need strong governance and so on in place in order for you to minimize the risk in that area. So we've seen it most applied back office efficiency applications. And in our own case, we've avoided anything that has to do with the customer facing part, at least for now. So that's where I see it being a bit tricky. And those reports you mentioned from MIT and Under Institute and a few others which I've come across kind of lean towards the same thing as well. That businesses are trying to push it and use it for these revenue generating activities that have to do with customer facing roles and engagements, but they're not seeing the benefits. Like that particular MIT report, it says 95% of businesses are just stuck at the pilot phase. They are not getting the results. But interestingly, if you dive deeper and look at the 5% that are actually getting the results, are the ones applying it to their back office operations and a few other things that they're doing to drive success. So that's a very interesting dynamic.
Interesting.
Mm,
I think uh, it's like there's huge opportunity to use AI at the back office to improve efficiency and so on, which automatically will translate into business growth.
mhm,
But most leaders maybe fail to they are looking at just how can I quickly deploy these things and maybe let
mhm,
me deploy sales agents and see my
mhm.
revenue double or triple. And
Exactly.
that's an interesting perspective.
Mhm.
And I think just like you've mentioned, and with these examples, it also becomes clear that tools are not like the real issue, right? It's the strategy or the thinking
Hmm.
really what matters. I think that led you to develop this framework you call circuits,
Hmm.
right? Which you've taught part of it. But can you tell us more, about the circuits framework and your experience working with organizations to use that framework?
Hmm. Thank you. So, so that brings us back to the data discussion. So there's a framework which I call circuits framework. It just talks about data operations, how business leaders can use that framework and view their business as like a data machine. Now, why data machine? Any business that exists would have some kind of customers, they would run some kind of processes and produce some kind of outcomes which get them paid. Which means when a customer comes to a business, it triggers certain things, right? They either fill a form, send an email, whatever it is, certain steps and workflows need to be triggered within the business for the business to satisfy the need of that customer and get paid. So the circuit framework aims to help businesses think about that process. What kind of operations are we taking through the business in order to yield the results we need to produce, right? Are we creating data? Are we interpreting data? Are we refining data? Are we creating data or are we capturing data? Are we tucking data away or are we sending data? Right? So it's a very simple way for a business leader to say, okay, in our workflows, what are the operations we're carrying out and how are they linked together? And it's about data and it's about data flow and it's about identifying inefficiencies. So you quickly start to see that, okay, whenever we run our workflows, when it comes to the part of refining the data, operations that have to do with refining data, this is where everything slows down. So at that point, they're able to say, okay, how do we make sure that we refine data in a better way? Can we do it? Sometimes a manual approach may work. Sometimes they need to use some specific type of software. Sometimes it's how they're linking their systems together. And in some cases, AI could help them do that. And if they're using AI, what kind of AI solution would work best for them, considering so many other factors. So that's where the circuits framework comes from. It's just like a data circuit that you have, electricity flowing and so on. So that's where it also comes, the analogy comes from.
Interesting.
Mm.
I think this, when it comes to transformation for businesses, it's going to be really useful. So
Hmm.
just beyond like using AI as a productivity tool, if you are thinking of how do you really want to transform your business and position it for that growth, then this data machine will be really important. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so talking more about data if and so on, and linking it to governance and control, which you mentioned about the importance of governance. And because it seems data is at the center of all this AI transformation. Now, I know you are as a person that is always thinking and emphasizing on process, control, and governance. So why do you believe these are often overlooked by leaders in AI conversations?
So, well, first of all, it's not as interesting as, just talking about AI and the other nice things around business. Governance has to do with setting up, policies and rules that guide your whole business. And when people or leaders talk about AI, they tend to categorize it with traditional software. and they apply those same rules to traditional software, forgetting that software and AI behave, in different ways. Software is more, you know, deterministic, it's linear, but for AI, it can give you different outcomes based on the same input, right? It's probabilistic type of outcomes it has. It's almost like taking when you take an intern and you bring them into your business, right? What the best thing you can do for that intern is to give them the space they need to work, but they need guidelines on what they can and cannot do. And when they need help, where to go and get that help. And how can they tell that they're doing a good job or not? Same thing applies to AI. That's where you need to apply that control and governance. But most leaders don't consider it in the first place and end up not even doing it until something goes wrong. From the technical point of view, whoever is deploying the AI, whether it's an internal team or an external partner, they build that system, you test it and it works, and then everybody goes off and they start using it. But then AI can do very funny things, right? It hallucinates and then it produces very funny results that you don't expect, depending on where you are deploying it, and it can create problems for the business. So I think it's just the lack of that literacy that has made it hard for business leaders to see the need to approach AI with this from this angle. Yeah.
That's very important one. And just to quickly, ask a follow-up question, can
Mm.
you, what are the specific risks that you see, in businesses, and they need to worry more about, and not even the AI itself?
So I for me, I think it's really about people, right? There's a serious risk there. And people in terms of staff within the business and customers. There's a very big risk of alienating these partners. And once you do, then you don't even have a business anymore. If you deploy AI in such a way that it causes problems for your customers, then you risk losing customers and revenue, as we've seen with so many examples. There's a popular one with Klarna that took AI, deployed it as their customer support engine. They got rid of like 700 staff, but then customers started complaining that the customer support was poor. The AI wasn't handling it well. At the end of the day, Klarna had to go back and hire humans to handle that work. So that's the risk on the customer facing side. Now, for staff, there's also a risk there because another thing that comes with the AI hype is that AI is going to replace people, right? It's going to replace jobs, which isn't untrue. But at the same time, there is a balance you can strike, which I feel is even a more powerful way of using AI, where you augment the intelligence of your humans and the AI. Now, if you want to bring AI into your business and you don't consider this risk or what your staff are thinking about it, then you risk them not adopting your solutions or even sabotaging your efforts. They just choose not to use it, right? So you have to really take care of the concerns of staff. When I run workshops to business leaders, I give them like a pre-workshop questionnaire that they fill. And a lot of times you find out that they say that they are concerned about losing the human touch when they are going to use AI in their business, especially with their staff. They don't want their staff to be demoralized because they're bringing in AI. But the good part or the good side of it is any successful AI implementation requires the involvement of your staff. And the more you involve them, right, the higher the chances they will adopt it and for you to get the outcomes you want. So if leaders ignore that risk of the human side, which has nothing to do with the AI itself or even the technical solution, then they risk not getting the results that they want.
Interesting, and this is something I want to pick your brain when we talk about AI and the risk of losing jobs and stuff like that.
Hmm.
We see AI agents now, they in some places trying to deploy AI agents, and yeah, like you said, really there are numbers of people losing their jobs and so on. But in the context of business owners, how should they take advantage of that, and how do they, in terms of talent management specifically, or
Hmm.
upskilling the organization, positioning it for growth? What's your own take when it comes to this AI and the whole risk of jobs?
Hmm. So I think the fact remains that there are certain things that AI can do way better than humans. And if unfortunately you have a human doing that same kind of work, and that's the only thing they do, then the chances that the AI will replace them is very high, right? So that's like 100% kind of scenario where they are replaced. But across so many other roles, you find out that certain things that you do in your job function, AI can do better. There are certain things you do in your own job function, AI cannot do as well as you can. So it's a matter of identifying what those functions are and seeing how best to use AI to either take it over or augment it together with the human. And that's another thing that business leaders need to consider in terms of introducing AI into their business. Um, Another thing is upskilling. If you if you look at the way things are going, AI is getting more and more entrenched in society and in business. And where people talk about it replacing jobs, at the same time, it's creating other roles as well. So businesses can identify this within their own context and see where they can upskill their people to actually fill those roles. But more importantly, individuals need to do that for themselves. Find out what can they do, what can they learn in order to make themselves relevant as the times are changing, right? Almost every kind of job that has to do with some knowledge work has an aspect of it that touches on AI, right? And I feel a human who knows how to use AI is going to be more valuable than just AI itself, even if it's just an AI agent, because you have that human angle to it. We do business with people. We talk to people every day. So if you are very good in using AI, then you have, a leg up. There's a popular saying that says AI will not replace people, but people that use AI would. And that's exactly what it is. And everybody's starting point is, okay, I just know my job, I don't have AI. And that's where the upskilling is. You need to be able to learn, you need to be able to train yourself so that you understand AI and how it applies to your job and your own use cases, right? So that can be done at individual level and at the level of the business as well.
Interesting.
Mm.
One key takeaway from that is business owners or leaders need to pay attention to upskilling, and ensuring that, yeah, their staff understand this AI and can use it efficiently and so on.
Yes. And I'll tell you right now, you start seeing businesses who are willing to have or pay a lot of money to get their staff trained and upskilled on AI. They're just coming up, but maybe over the next 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to see more and more of that, right? To show you how important it is. Like you mentioned when we started, this is one of the greatest technology shifts we are witnessing. And there's a lot of hype, but beneath it, there's a tremendous amount of value, which is what we're trying to bring to these business leaders. So So yes, that upskilling is really important.
Yeah. Well, our vision in a distinction is about, creating lifelong learners. We just talked about business paying attention to upskill their staff because these things, there's always transformation happening or technology disruption, and people need to evolve. So just shifting to you now in terms of your leadership and
Hmm.
evolution. Over time, you remain relevant across multiple technology waves and so on. So, what habits or principles have helped you continue evolving
Hmm.
as things change?
Yeah, thank you for that. So for me, I've always been passionate about technology. I find it very interesting. And with the peers I grew up with, worked with, at a point they saw it that you would outgrow technology. You get to a point whereby maybe you stop writing code or you stop bothering yourself about technology and then you just do maybe management stuff, which makes sense because you have that career growth and so on. But for me, I am so passionate about it that I've always wanted to keep, fresh and doing the technology things. But you can't do that if you're not a lifelong learner. You need to constantly keep learning, not as a job, but as something that you find interesting to do, right? So I believe it's that consistent learning over and over. Something new comes up, I learn about it and I decide whether it's something I want to do or not. And there've been so many things that I've wanted to do, but I just don't have the bandwidth to handle. And others I just decided not to even focus on. For example, you have the blockchain technology, Bitcoin, and cryptocurrency. All those things came up as new technologies that are going to change the face of tech. I looked into it, but I didn't really see how that would happen. Same thing with AI. When AI was, the wave around 2022 or so, I looked at it as well and said, we've been hearing about this AI, data scientist, data analyst, building models for so many years, even right from when we were doing the GDG stuff, 2009, 2010. There were some of our peers that even used it in their school projects and so on. They were using AI and neural networks and so. So when it came quite popular in 2022, I was like, what is it again with this? And just before then, you had the wave of data analytics, business intelligence, data science. There was a lot of talk about that. But then I saw that this was slightly different. It could permeate through the whole, every aspect of life on earth. And I had to really educate myself, sit down and start learning, right? So it's just part of that habit of being a lifelong learner. At the beginning, I mentioned when I started in, I think, 1999, 2000. Since then till now, 26, 25 years, I'm always learning one thing or the other. So the value of learning is, it can't be overstated really.
Thank you for that very important, advice.
Mm.
So as we begin to round up, uh, let's take it like a bit more practical. If a business leader is watching you right now, what one practical step, let's say in the next 30 days,
Mm.
can they take to get AI right?
I think the first thing they need to do is educate themselves, right? They need to learn about what AI truly is and within the context of business. It's really more than what you hear about on the news. So they need to educate themselves on that. And for me, when it comes to education, you shouldn't learn from just one single source. Try and get multiple sources that talk about that thing you want to learn about, and just let all that information flow to you. And you start to notice the patterns that, okay, this is useful, this has been said here. And then you start to see, once you notice those patterns and categories, you can now dive deeper into those areas and learn even more. So the business leader needs to really learn about what AI truly is and how it applies to business. Another thing they need to do is think about how AI can help their business, right? Look at their workflows and try and identify ways in which AI can improve their business, whether it's the efficiency angle or the customer facing angle. That's where that circuit framework comes in place. They can use that to understand what they currently do and kind of set some kind of goals that this is what we want to use AI for and to achieve in our business. Then they can start thinking about, okay, how do we go about it? Who would help us do it? Are we going to build it in-house and so on? But the core thing is that education and figuring out how to bring it into their business. And of course, with that comes the guidelines they need to set up. So they can look for courses online that they can enroll on, even on distinction, for example, get newsletters, follow certain sources online to get all the information they need to educate themselves.
Interesting.
Mm.
I think this is really powerful. Education and still around strategies. But just as a follow-up, when it comes to education, can you break down maybe, especially for non-tech business owners, what are specific skills you think they can pay attention to instead of, just leaving everything entirely to a technical team or consultant to help them to make sure they get it right and so on? Are there specific skills you can think of?
I'm not sure of specific skills, but I think it's more or less a mindset. They need to have an open mindset. And like you said, not hand over everything to the technical people. And for them to do that, it brings us back to that education thing. They need to educate themselves on AI and understand it. Otherwise, anyone can build them the solution, whether it's an external partner or in-house. But then that solution, once it's built, they won't be able to manage it because AI behaves differently, like we discussed earlier. So, as a business person, you are non-technical. Again, educate yourself on what AI is and how it helps your business. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's having that open mindset in trying
Yeah.
to absorb as many pieces of information as you can get so that you make better decisions as a business leader because the landscape is changing. The businesses that would do it right and win will be businesses that would figure out these things and be able to handle far more capacity at a faster rate with higher accuracy than any other business that's not using AI, right? Which means they'll now attract even more business and be able to grow even more and have systems in place that make their own AI even learn as well. As they're growing, the AI is learning. It just compounds. And that's what's going to happen really. Businesses that get it right are just going to grow exponentially and leave the other ones way behind. Yeah. So that
Yeah.
business vision, that problem, that vision that the business leader has is good, but they don't need to augment it with this knowledge of what AI can do. You know.
Yeah, interesting. And I think just your last point and the in line with the last question I want to ask in terms of positioning themselves for this growth. So if you are speaking to your younger self, back in the Google developer group days and things like that, what advice would you give about building technology with long-term impact?
Hmm, interesting. Building technology with long-term impact. So what comes to mind is there are two ways. to view it, especially looking at myself back in those days. I was just involved in tech. We're just passionate about it. We just love building things. We're not really thinking about impact or how it helps people or even businesses. So the advice would be to find ways or try and understand the business angle of things as much as possible. Otherwise, you end up just building nice toys that you can play with, you can show off, and but it won't have any impact. But once you understand how this can be applied through business, right, which a lot of technical people don't do, they just focus on the technical angle. They get to see how they can build things that would have long-term impact. But at the same time, you mentioned, I was involved with the first team that built the first version of Distinction, maybe 2016, 2017. What I have learned from that experience kind of ties into this question. Distinction has been in development since maybe that time, maybe 10 years or 9 years. It's been existing and it's evolving. You A lot of products would have just died down. But because it's also evolving alongside technology changes, shifts in business environment, right? You have that vision and leadership where you're able to incorporate these things into the product. The vision remains the same, but how it is built and delivered is what changes, right? So those are the things I would advise myself, especially looking back.
Yeah, thank you for that. And like you said, distinction, back then when you were leading, we focused on primary, secondary schools and things like that. And now we have AI. And last 1 to 2 years, we pivoted completely and so on. And before we take questions, I'll use the opportunity to even talk more about distinction and what we've been doing, and also introduce the audience to your course on distinction.
Mm,
Framework you mentioned, the circuit framework. So Bulama has a course on that, on distinction. It's called the Your AI Advantage, using AI to drive organizational efficiency. Is on Distinction. Go to distinction.app and search for that course, or you can scan this QR code. He has interactive videos in the course that explain the circuit framework and some of the ideas and concepts he talked about in this discussion. And talking more about Distinction, is an AI-powered teaching and learning platform that empowers creators to turn any syllabus into a full course, and also gives every student an AI agent that personalizes their learning. So you can easily get started as a learner, especially. We talked about building AI skills and so on. You can enroll on Distinction today to start accessing available courses. You can go to the AI category where we have over 50 courses to identify the right AI course for you or your staff to get started. And we have also other courses around soft skills, effective communication in the workplace, and so on, which are accredited by Continuing Professional Development in the UK. And another exciting thing about Distinction is, even if you can't find like really specific field, maybe your field is very unique and so on, you can build that course in 2 minutes and start learning. And that's where the lifelong learning capability of Distinction is very powerful. So that's briefly about Distinction. And think we have time to take one or two questions before we call it a day. So if you have questions, please raise your hand and you unmute. And meanwhile, I think there are some questions on the chat. This from Al Mustafa. What does it take to build an AI-powered platform to solve a real-world problem in the health sector? Also, which path can one follow to get funding?
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question, Al Mustafa, right? So your question is loaded with so many things in there. There's funding, there's AI in the real world, there's the health sector, and then building the platform itself. So if you're building this kind of thing, you know that you're dealing with software and AI, right? So you need to know how to build the software platform. But what I would say is you need to also find out how does AI fit? Where are you going to put AI in this system you're trying to build? What do you want it to do? If it's a healthcare platform, what does the AI do? What will it do? So most likely, that problem you're trying to solve, I believe most likely there are humans who do that particular task. So you need to know that if a human was to do that task in your platform, what would they do? Right? That's exactly where you're going to put your AI platform into. The rest of it is knowing how to build software systems and integrate everything together and deploy it. For the funding, I don't know. I don't think I have an answer to that. Uh, but I'm sure there are online places you can check out to see if you can get funding, especially people who fund healthcare sector ideas. I think there are quite a number of them. None comes to mind right now.
Yeah. So talking about funding, I believe the principles are the same for almost every startup. Coincidentally, we had a webinar with Tommy Davis, the father of angel investment in Africa. You can go visit FlexISAF channel on YouTube to watch that session. And he also has a course on distinction called the Poem Framework that educates startups on what they need to do, to build traction and get in funding. So I think that will help. We have another question here about uh, what's the risk from your perspective on deploying AI for risk assessment in KYC and credit underwriting?
So the first thing that comes to mind, thank you for that question. I think it's Usman, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you for that question. Um, I think the first risk that comes from that is the biases that will be inherent in the AI model that will be behind making these decisions, right? Because you're talking about credit underwriting, KYC. Um, if the model has certain biases in there, then they will certainly show up because you're feeding it data. You want it to make decisions or help you make decisions. The decisions it will make will be based on those patterns. Just recently, I came across some failed AI projects, and one of them talked about something Amazon was trying to do with CVs, right? Getting CVs and processing them, and getting them ready for interviews and so on. Now, what they found out after a certain amount of use was that it was not favoring female candidates, right? So if the CV was from a female candidate, the model was not favoring them. And that was due to some bias within the model. And of course, that comes from the bias in the data sets that were used to train that model. So a risk of something like this is whatever model you're using, if you don't know how it was trained or what data set was used, which now comes to, the, how transparent these models are. Do you know that information? And how are you able to build trust with the model? You find out that it will put those biases into your own decision making as well. So that's the number one risk I see. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think these are the questions we have so far. Okay, there's another one. What's
Mm.
the most important factor to consider when integrating AI for my startup business?
Mm. Most important, a lot of factors. I'll be able to say most important factor without understanding, what the context of your startup is. But there are a number of things you need to consider. And I think for a startup, maybe one of the first things would be cost. If you're taking a model, how are you going to run it? Is it hosted by a third party? How much are they charging you for making inference, the tokens, and so on? If you're hosting it on your own infrastructure, how specialized does that infrastructure have to be? Can you run it on CPU-based servers, or do you have to be GPUs? And how much will that cost you? Right. So I think those are the things you need to consider first of all in terms of how to cost you, because the challenge with a lot of startups using AI and businesses that have large customers is that they lose more money running the AI model, people chatting, asking questions, than they make, right? Even things, companies like OpenAI and so on, they are hemorrhaging a lot of money just keeping these models running, right? It costs them more for people to use the models than they're making from it. Someone said, I think it was Sam Altman that said recently that when people say thank you, I think he gave a number for how much it costs when you tell the model thank you. So when you're doing a startup and you're hosting these kind of models, you need to be aware of these kinds of costs. So you have to get your unit economics right. Are you going to run it at a loss for a certain period of time? And if yes, how long? How many users do you need to get to cover it? Or would users pay from day one? And if they're paying for day one, does it cover the interactions they would have with the AI model? And the AI model cost is just one of many costs you need to deal with. Yeah, thank you.
I like that thank you insight. So it means I said thank you to the AI. I think from today I will stop to minimize cost. But I think this is a perfect way to end this. And on this note, we would like to really thank you for taking your time and everyone else that have found time to join us today to discuss this important topic, AI beyond the hype. We look forward to hosting you in the future and also look out on our social media platforms and so on for the next interesting webinars that we have lined up for you all. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone for attending. Bye.